Welcome, good evening from Kraków, but good morning in the US. Such a pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Jakub Nowakowski. I'm the director of the Galician Jewish Museum in Kraków, Poland. And again, this is a great honor and privilege for me to take part in this meeting and show you around through the Galician Jewish Museum's core exhibition called Traces of Memory. So I'll soon take you for a jump to Kraków, and I hope you'll enjoy. I hope that on top of meeting next year in Jerusalem, Shana Tova to all of you who are celebrating, perhaps also we will meet next year in Kraków at the Galician Jewish Museum. That would certainly be lovely. So I don't know if we should maybe give a few more seconds to for everybody to join in. I see that the numbers are still going up, but perhaps let me slowly start, and I'll be speaking for around 5 hours. Oh no, that's not that program. I'll do my best to do it in 45 minutes. So that's going to be a very kind of quick tour of this core exhibition and a few sidetracks to tell you about some other projects that we've been doing. So bear this in mind, that this is not entirely best way to see the exhibition. We should be spending around an hour in that space to have a full sense of what the exhibition looks like and what does it show. But nevertheless, let me start. So buckle up, and here we are. This is Kraków. This is not Kraków of today, but this slide, this presentation was done in the winter last year. But nevertheless, this is Kraków, or actually to be even more specific, this is Kazimierz, so the Krakow's Jewish district. When this part of when the city was created, it was created in 14th century. It was for a couple hundred years actually a separate city, and within this separate city that was called Kazimierz after the name of the king, Polish king Kazimierz the Great, who founded that city. So within that city there was also a Jewish city, a Jewish district, with its walls and synagogues and mikvahs and cemeteries, with the entire infrastructure of life. And Kazimierz today is very unique because unlike other Jewish districts in Eastern Europe, unlike Warsaw or unlike other places in Poland, Kazimierz has never been destroyed. It was not destroyed during the First World War. It was not destroyed during the Holocaust. So whenever you come to Kraków, you can see, and most of all to Kazimierz, you can see this original fabric of the Jewish town that existed throughout the last almost 600 years. So what you see is the oldest synagogue in Poland. This is the old synagogue here from the end of 15th century. But then there are going to be synagogues from 16, 17, 18, all the way until the 19th century. And the Galician Jewish Museum is located just around the corner from this old synagogue, the oldest synagogue in Poland. It's spread out through 3 buildings. This is still Kazimierz. These are all historical buildings. This used to be the red brick building, was a printing house and woodwork factory. The gray building was an industrial mill, and so on and so on. And Galician Jewish Museum, when it was created back in 2004, from very beginning, was never meant to be Holocaust memorial, or not even like a proper historical museum. Galician Jewish Museum in many ways was to be a contemporary museum that is welcoming the visitors and encouraging them to look at the Jewish Jewish experience, not only through the story of the past, of the Holocaust, of the post-war oblivion, but rather as a story of that still continues. As from our point of view, Jewish Poland is the best place where you can learn not only about the past, not only about the destruction, but about the continuity of the Jewish experience despite the Holocaust, despite the destruction, despite the anti-Semitism. And we're dealing with this subject through a number of ways, through exhibitions, educational programs, and so on and so on. There's going to be a product placement. We also have probably the best Jewish bookshop in all of Poland. We do sell books online. You can go to our website and order those books. All right, but because we don't really have that much time, so let me take you through to the core exhibition, Traces of Memory. Traces of Memory is a peculiar exhibition. It's entirely photographic exhibition and includes photographs that were taken between 1993 and 2018 by two photographers, the original founder of the museum, Chris Schwartz, who died in 2007, and then by American photographer, Professor Jason Francisco, who has done a number of updates of this exhibition with the new photographs. So that's important because in that sense, exhibition is dynamic. Dynamic in a sense that it's not a snapshot of one moment in time. It's not a report from Poland of, let's say, 1993 or 2016 or 2018. What you'll see here are the processes, the things that have been happening in Poland over those last 30 years. So on occasions, we will be getting back to the same places to see how they have changed, how they looked like in 1993, how they look today. The idea, the concept of the exhibition has been created by Professor Jonathan Weber, British anthropologist, sociologist, Holocaust researcher, who has been specializing in the subjects of Holocaust, but also Jewish heritage and memory. And he came up with this idea of putting an exhibition that would not go through the subject or tackle the subject chronologically. So we not start in let's say 1993 or in the 19th century or 15th century, but thematically. And through the first set of photographs, he is asking a question, a very powerful and important question, and yet very simple question. What is Jewish Poland? What kind of images we have in mind when we think about Jewish Poland? What kind of emotions does this subject spark in us? And obviously, there are going to be different answers because we are all different, have different backgrounds and family histories. But in general, for most of the people, especially those with Jewish roots, Poland is precisely this. I mean, this is a gray, empty space, which is an open, a void, an empty space, a post-Jewish space, just dotted randomly with traces of the Jewish heritage. And this is actually true. I mean, this photograph, this photo that you see here, this is a photo of a tombstone at the site of the former Jewish cemetery that in 1941 was flattened by the Germans, who created at the site of this Jewish cemetery, actually two Jewish cemeteries, a concentration camp. If you're familiar with Spielberg's Schindler's List, this is precisely the story. This is a Płaszów camp with Amon Get, and the big part of the story in the movie actually happens here. So while the Germans destroyed all the tombstones, they used them to pave the roads within the camp. They left this one tombstone intact. We don't know why. We don't know why was the purpose of that, but nevertheless, this tombstone is still there. And it's a symbol of this randomness, random chances of survival of objects, but also of people. As we all know, out of 3.5 million Jews that lived in Poland in 1939, 90%, more than 3 million, were killed. Those that survived sometimes survived because they were strong, healthy, richer, but often they survived by just pure chance. So that's one way of looking at Poland. But there is also another idea of Poland, the idea of Poland of the pre-destruction, the pre-Holocaust, the site where Jews been living for centuries, where Jews created vibrant, diverse, rich civilization. And actually, this plaque that you can see here is located at the city hall of Kazimierz, so of that Jewish district. This plaque was erected in early 20th century by the Jewish community themselves. It was created by a Jewish artist, Henryk Hochman. And I don't know if you really can see it, but you see here a group of refugees, Jews from Western Europe, who are who are welcomed by the Kingdom of Poland, and you can see the wings. And so there is a petrification of kind of a representation. The kingdom is represented as an angel. So there is another way of looking at Poland as a place where Jews have been living for centuries, and this is precisely what makes Poland so complicated. I mean, you will not find anywhere else in all of the world, another place where you will find so many traces of Jewish life standing so close to so many traces of Jewish death. This is only Poland, because this was only Poland that have had this huge Jewish community. And Poland is important because if we would go back to the end of 18th century, so just before partitions, at the end of 18th century, Poland is divided between neighboring countries and disappear from the map. But in that particular moment in time, approximately 75% of all the Jews of the world are living in Poland. So Poland at that very moment in time is the absolute center of the Jewish world. And then 200 years later, or whatever it is, 150 years later, Poland is becoming the absolute center of Jewish death. Out of 6 million Jews killed, most are being killed in occupied Poland or Eastern Europe. So what you can see when coming to Poland is, and that's something that this idea that many people have when coming to Poland, is Poland as a land of ruin, as a land of abandoned places, as an absence of presence. And that's true. I mean, again, if we will forget for a second about places where today we have Jewish communities, so major cities and towns like Kraków or Warsaw or Łódź, but if you'd go to hundreds and thousands of places where before the war Jewish community existed, like this one, in a small town of Biecz, Jewish life is gone. There is not a single Jew living in this town today, but the town still is a witness to their presence. So this is actually a photo of the main square in that small town. 15% of the members of the community of that town before the war was Jewish, so not terribly large percentage, but nevertheless they were visible, vibrant, proud, and significant. And actually, again, this is a main square, and actually one of those buildings is a synagogue. So now you can look and try for yourself to identify which one of those buildings used to be a synagogue. I'll help you out. So this yellow building here, you can still see two separate doors, one for men and the other one for women. And actually inside there are paintings on the walls of Jerusalem and commandments and so on. So on. Today it's a library, but in the basement there is a small Jewish museum, the museum about the history of the Jews of that town. So you can come to Poland and go through places and see either former synagogues or traces after mezuzot that are visible across all of Poland, sometimes being the only trace left after the Jews that have been living in those buildings. We know nothing about people that lived there, but we know that they existed. And again, the destruction that been happening during the war, but also after the war. So here we can see a photo of a collapsed or ruins of the bushes. Actually, this photo was taken in 2016. In 1993, we have another exhibition, another photo from that same place from 1993, and you can see that the synagogue is still standing in 1993. But with time, because the Jewish community doesn't exist in this town, because the Jewish community of Poland is too small to take care of all the synagogues, the building collapsed. So you can see that in many places, this process of destruction, of oblivion continues. The destruction happened not only by the Germans, but also by the Poles. So here, when Chris Schwartz was arriving to a small village looking for a Jewish cemetery, he approached a local villager a farmer asking, "Can you show me where the Jewish cemetery used to be?" And the farmer actually said, "Yes, yes, I'll show you. But how about I'll show you what my father-in-law has done right after the war?" And he showed him. His father-in-law, after the war, went to the Jewish cemetery. There were no Jews alive anymore in that village. He took the tombstone, broke it into pieces, and paved the entrance to his house with those tombstones. 6 years later, the story changed, and the young man living in that place feels uncomfortable with that. And together with the photographer, with Prischwartz, they taking back those tombstones to the Jewish cemetery. So the destruction happened throughout Poland. And actually, it exists. I mean, the traces of the Jewish past can be seen anywhere across all of Poland. This is a beautiful photo from a Zakopane, city of Zakopane, or town of Zakopane, which is like a ski resort, most famous ski resort in all of Poland. Every winter and every summer, hundreds of thousands of Poles are going there. Most of them have no idea that Holocaust happened also there, in this lovely, beautiful, picturesque city of Zakopane. And actually, this is the Jewish cemetery in that town. These are tombstones that were destroyed by the Germans. So on one hand, Poland is land of ruins, and that's kind of the general feeling with that people brings in when come to Poland. But then we have a second section of the exhibition in which we're asking different question. I mean, what if, instead of looking at Jewish Poland only through ruins, only through emptiness and sorrow and depression, we will look at the diversity and glory and richness of this Jewish world that existed here for centuries. So that's the second section. The second section offers us a very different idea, and is talking about culture, about heritage, again, about this diverse world. And one of the reasons why Poland has been the largest and home to the largest Jewish community for 500 years until 20th century and 19th century, when the largest Jewish community became in the US, was that the Jews been accepted, welcomed, protected by the Polish kings. So all the way from 13th century, from 12th century and 13th century, almost every single Polish king would confirm or even expand certain privileges toward the Jewish community, privileges that would guard them, would guarantee them free of religion, of language, of their own legal system. In Poland, the Jewish communities created a Vat Arba Artsot, government of four lands, which was an independent legal system. And actually, this synagogue here in the city of Lesko has this unusual shape with this tower. It's very unusual, but nevertheless, this synagogue, on top of being a place of worship, was also a house of a Jewish court. And as there was a Jewish court, there was also a prison for those members of community that would be sentenced to prison. And actually, this is precisely this tower. But the privileges that the Jews been granted included protection. I mean, the Jews been treated as a servants of the king, as a king's men, meaning that if you attack a Jew, it is as you attack a king himself. So that's a punishment. That's a capital punishment for this action. And it really happened. I mean, in Kraków, there was one major pogrom at the end of, 15th century. And during this pogrom, the Jews from the city of Kraków were running for their lives to this castle, royal castle, and were protected by the king's soldiers against the mob of Kraków. And when the situation got under control, it was precisely the king's men that would go down from the castle hill and were cutting heads of a mob. And the mob had to pay retaliation, not to the Jews, but to the king, because it was his loss, the damage that was done to his property, meaning the Jews. So of course, I mean, this was this welcoming and generosity was not coming from good heart. The kings, the Polish noblemen had an interest in that. It was benefiting the economy of the kingdom. So that was certainly a deal in which for protection the Jews would work and multiply the richness of the kingdom. And actually today, instead of all, on top of looking at the synagogues that are in ruins, you can also see some of those that have been restored, that survived the war, and today can tell us about how beautiful, how diversified, how glorious this Jewish civilization has been before the destruction. This is a synagogue, one of the most beautiful synagogues that still exists in Poland, in the small town of Łańcut. The Łańcut Jewish community was not the richest, was not the biggest, was not the greatest of all, was one of thousands. And yet they were able to put together such a beautiful building. And today you can come and see it. Every year we have, every normal year where there is no COVID, we have thousands and thousands of Jewish visitors coming not only to see Auschwitz. That's it. This is a primary destination of visitors, but also to this small gray synagogue. But in many ways, this is one of the most, if not the most important synagogues in all of Poland. This is a synagogue that is called Remu Synagogue, after the Rabbi Moshe Isserles, who has codified the Jewish tradition, Jewish law. So if you are an Ashkenazi Jew, wherever you live, there is a big chance that in your daily religious life traditions, you are following actually some of the regulations that were created by Moshe Isserles in that synagogue just around the corner from the Galician Jewish Museum. And you can see the synagogue he would pray, you can see his grave, and follow his footsteps. So Poland was important not only because of the numbers of the Jews. It's not only important because it was the largest Jewish community, but also because the quality of the work. Hasidism was created here. Many trends that are shaping present-day Jewish world comes from Eastern Europe, comes from Poland. But one of my favorite photographs in this entire second section that again talks about diversity of the Jewish world and talks about Jews that have been living in isolation and were Hasidim and were not looking for interaction with the outside world. We have also this photo, and again that's actually the entrance to this royal castle of the Polish kings. In 1920s and 1930s, it was in very poor condition, so there was a fundraising campaign, and just like we do today, and the major donors were recognized by plaques. So when entering the castle, you can see those plaques. And actually, among those names and organizations, you will see also Jews. You will also Jewish names. So here you see a plaque that is commemorating one of the major donors, Israel Mendelbaum. And below, there is also his job description written. He's a mayor of the city of Trzebinia. So again, it tells us a few things. It tells us that Jews, that for some reason, Israel Mendelbaum, and actually more Jews that are recognized in this plaque, has understood that the heritage of the Polish kings is also part of their heritage of the Polish Jews. But it tells us also that it was possible for the Jews to be mayors of large towns in Poland. Of course, in the 1920s, 1930s, especially 1930s, it's time of, first of all, growing anti-Semitism, with pogroms, with violence, with anti-Semitism, with pushing out the Jews from more and more aspects of life of the Second Republic of Poland, but also with the growing poverty. So while some of the Polish Jews been successful, at least economically, like the one that we've seen before, more and more we're actually getting more and more poor. Many of them will live in shabby areas, overpopulated, doing very weakly paid jobs, and so on and so on. And actually, this is also from Kazimierz district, which was precisely, although this is one of the most beautiful districts of Kraków today, before the war, it was overpopulated and shabby, pretty smelly place. And then there is a third section of the exhibition. So at the very beginning, we've seen this general idea of Poland as a land of ashes. Then we've went to a different kind of idea, and we looked at the Poland as a site, as a place of wonderful, diversified Jewish civilization that existed until it was destroyed. And this is the third section that we're looking now, which is devoted to the Holocaust. And in this section, we have a number of photographs, but actually you probably notice that it doesn't start with those very iconic photographs that we usually have in mind when thinking about Holocaust. Auschwitz, Arbach macht frei, the gate to Auschwitz camp, the barracks, Berber wires, and so on and so on. We'll get there. But actually, exhibitions start with something different. As the mass killing of the Polish Jews, especially Galician Jews, and all of those photographs that I showed you here actually were taken in southern Poland, so the area that once was called Galicia. So the mass killing of the Galician Jews, of the Polish Jews, actually started not in Auschwitz, but started in other places, in places like this. In the summer of 1942, 364 Jews from this village were killed by the German soldiers, by the Einsatzgruppe, Special Mobile Killing Squad. And what I wanted to show you is actually a date of this killing. This is August 10, 1942. Then we have another photograph of another mass grave in another small town. And that's important because the 260 Jews in this village were killed on August 12 of 1942. So just 2 days after the previous killing. And then we can go here to yet another mass grave in a small village in the Polish forest to learn that the 500 elderly Jews were killed on August 13th of 1942, day after the previous killing. And then we can go to this village and to this mass grave and to learn that the Jews of that area, 881 people, were killed on August 19th. But actually, between August 13th and August 19th, there were a few other places where the massacres took place. So this section of few photographs, and it continues here, is to represent what happened in the summer of 1942 during so-called Reinhardt operation, so the mass killing of Galician, Eastern European Galician Jews. At least 1.5 million people been killed in such places. Most of them never went through any ghettos or slave labor camps or concentration camps. They never seen Auschwitz. They were killed in the forest, in the riverbanks, in the pits, in the fields, just few steps from where they lived. And this is important. I mean, this is important because of a couple of things. First of all, this creates a very different dynamic of memory. I mean, if you're connecting from the US to go to experience a Holocaust memorial or a site related to the Holocaust, most likely you need to go make a visit, to go to see a monument or to go to the museum. In Poland, you're living in that space. Entire Poland is the one last vast post-Holocaust space, because every single town and every single village will have its graves of the Jews that have been killed, sometimes in bigger numbers, sometimes in smaller numbers. So that kind of creates a very different reality. How do we commemorate all those places? Especially that for 50 or 60 years after the war, none of this would be described, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But the second important thing that comes out from this process of mass killing is that this process took place in a broad daylight. It was not in hiding. It was not at night. Local neighbors were absolutely aware of what's been happening. They've seen the Jews being gathered. They've seen the Jews being robbed. They've seen the Jews being walked, and they've seen the Jews being shot. They knew that the Jews will not be coming back. And this, because they were so close, they witnessed that created a whole lot of possibilities of reaction that didn't exist in Western Europe. I mean, if you were a German living in Berlin, you didn't see bodies of your Jewish neighbors killed in Berlin because they were not killed in Berlin. Same if you were French living in Paris. The Jews of Paris were not killed in Paris. Jews of Budapest, of Hungary, were not killed in Hungary. Jews of Saloniki in Greece were not killed in Greece. They've been all shipped and killed in occupied Poland in the camps or in places like this. But if you were a Polish villager living in this village, you have seen everything from day one to day last. You've witnessed. And of course, you've been encouraged by the Germans to participate. In many places, local communities, members of the local communities would participate in the process, hunting down, robbing, betraying their Jewish neighbors. In the same villages, in the same places, there were people that did nothing out of fear or out of lack of interest. And in the same places, in the same villages, there was also those that have been hiding the Jews, helping the Jews. But actually, at the end of the day, whatever you felt, whatever you felt toward those Jewish people that have been killed, whether you were happy or sad, whether you were sympathetic, whether you participated or whether you were hiding, it really didn't matter. Because at the end of the day, 90% or even more of the Jews of your town were dead. So again, that created a very different reality. Sorry. And we talk about this reality through two stories. This is a very unusual site. You can probably see that this is a grave where you see a Star of David, a Magen David, and a cross. Actually, this is a grave of a Polish Gentile, Catholic Pole, who was sheltering Jewish family. Their name was Fish. They were betrayed and killed. And both the Catholic gentleman, Mr. Jan Anton, and his family of Fish are now buried in this joint grave. So yes, there were those that have been trying to help, despite the harsh punishment, despite knowing that the Germans announced and made it widely everybody aware that the penalty for helping the Jews would be death. And people knew that this is a real threat. Although some people have been sent to concentration camps instead of being shot, people have seen and heard and witnessed enough killing to know that this is a genuine risk. And yet, Mr. Jankin and many other people have been trying to help. And this is happening in the summer of 1942 in one village. In the other village, which is not that far away, in the winter of the same year, 1942, Polish farmers caught the Jews that had been hiding in the forest, locked them in the barn, been torturing them for a couple of days, trying to get to get the answer, where's the mythical Jewish gold. And when they were done, they called the German police that arrived and killed the Jews. So again, this is happening very close to each other. And actually, in that village of Niewczyna, there are, in the nearby house, there are Jews in hiding, hidden by the other Polish families. So there's no one scenario of the reaction of the locals. And again, we could and we should spend more time on that on that subject. But I wanted to show you is yet another complication that makes Poland so difficult and so complicated. And that's already I've mentioned that at the very beginning. I mean, look at this photo. This is an oil refinery that was created before the outbreak of the Second World War in 1930s. When the war broke out, the refinery oil plant was taken by the Germans, and the Jews and Russian prisoners of war were used as slave laborers. Hundreds of them were killed. The concentration camp was built at the site, and so on and so on. And then, after the end of the war, and today, this is still a working oil refinery. This is still an oil plant. So how do we commemorate the slave labor and mass killing sites at the places of the that still are active, that still are part of the living country? And that's complicated because according to United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, in the occupied Poland, Germans created more than 20,000 concentration slave labor camps and the ghettos. More than 20,000 places. Some of them existed for months and years. Some of them existed for weeks. Some of them were large and some of them were small. But they exist throughout the entire country. And while, again, Auschwitz has been became a symbol of destruction and the symbol of the Holocaust, this is perhaps a place that for the Jews of Galicia, southern Poland, has been far more important. This is the site of the death camp in Bełżec. Most of the visitors to Poland, most of the visitors to the Galicia Jewish Museum had never heard about this place of Bełżec, while actually Bełżec became a primary destination and primary site of death of Galician Jews. Within more or less 12 months, in that very site, Germans killed approximately 500,000 Jews. And the reason why so many people, most of people never heard about this is very simple. Out of those 500,000 people that have been killed in that location, we know about less than 10 survivors, and historians know about less than 10 survivors. This was a perfect death factory. And after the war, for many, many years, because there was first of all, communist Poland was not interested in commemorating the past, but also because there were so little survivors and so little information, this is how this site looked like. Until in 2004, it was changed, and I'll show you that in a second. And then we have an entire wall devoted to Auschwitz. And please forgive me. I mean, we should spend at least 60 minutes, 90 minutes to talk about Auschwitz. And that's a place or a site that I'm sure most of you will have some information. So I'll skip Auschwitz, not out of respect, lack of respect, but because of being just aware of time. But yes, this entire Auschwitz section is here to talk about the importance of Auschwitz and the history of Auschwitz. So I'm skipping Auschwitz, but this is not the end of the exhibition. But if you look at the exhibitions about history of the Polish Jews in most of the museums around the world, the Jewish story or the story of the Polish Jews will end with Auschwitz. And in a sense, that's true. I mean, again, 90% of the Polish Jews were killed in the Holocaust. But then there were those that survived. And some of them decided to come back to Poland in 1945, in 1946. And for a certain moment, there was as many as 300,000, almost 300,000 Jews in Poland after the war. But then we can only imagine, most of us, probably can only imagine how difficult it was to rebuild your life, your world in the land of ashes, where so much has been destroyed, where your property was taken over. I mean, those that survived and came back discovered that their homes were not kept for them. They were taken by their neighbors. The families been killed. So it was extremely horrible from those point of view to rebuild, to start rebuilding life. But nevertheless, some of those people decided that they want to try to rebuild their Jewish life in Poland. And in many places, they would start from building such a wailing walls. Out of fragments of the shattered tombstones, they would build such a structures. And in a sense, I think that is very symbolic representations of those people, of their souls. Even though they survived, they all been broken into pieces. They've been victimized. They've been scarred until the very end of their life. And that's maybe a good representation. But of course, this destruction was not the only reason why Poland was why it was so difficult to be a Jew in Poland after the war. There was also violence, anti-Semitism, political situation. Poland has become a communist country, and communist regime was not interested at all in commemorating Jewish victims. Poland was also destroyed. I mean, we are now all witnessing footages from Ukraine, and we can only that can give us an idea of the totalness of the destruction after 5 years or 6 years of war. So Poland has been flattened with no industry, no economy, no agriculture, nothing. And this is actually show again this transition. So that was the beginning: lack of memory, lack of recognition, And this is 2004. This is actually Bełżec. So this is the site where 500,000 Jews been killed. The site that for 70 years was not recognized at all by the official narration. So in 2004, it has changed with this huge memorial. I don't really know whether you can see it well, but these are kind of lava stones scattered all over the place. And there is a corridor that will take you down and down almost under the ground. And you'll see the names of the towns engraved from which the Jews were brought here and killed, even the smallest ones. So now today, it's no doubt one of the most powerful and moving Holocaust memorials. And what happened in the meantime was those 70 or 60 years or 50 years of communism. In 1945, Poland is not becoming a democratic country; it's becoming part of the Soviet bloc, and it's part of the Soviet bloc until collapse of the communism in 1989, until the first democratic elections. Well, so what happens in the meantime is the erasure of the memory. So this is a good example. I mean, this is a killing site of almost 8,000 Jews in Zbylitowska Góra, near the city of Tarnów. And right after the war, survivors put together this small memorial, small monument. But then in the 1960s, the officials, the government, the local government erected this huge structure overlooking the site, overshadowing this small, humble memorial. And it says, honor to the victims of the Nazi terror. It says that it cites fragments from the Bible, may their blood will never dry, and so on. But it lacks one key information: who are the victims? And this kind of colonization of memory happened throughout all of Poland, throughout 60s, 70s, and even early 80s. And that change in 1990s, when the Holocaust, for the first time since the war, has been introduced properly to the curriculum. The sites has been recognized and today are acknowledged. But what we see today is again kind of another complication. Today in Poland there is almost or around 800 synagogues still standing. 800 synagogues, and that's only a fracture of those that have been there before the war. And some of them will look like this, been destroyed, blown up by the Germans, like the one in Tarnów. Only the Bima structure survived, and then the local community, non-Jewish, the local authorities covered it, protected it, marked the walls of the synagogue, and today are using this space as a memorial to the Jews of that village, of that town. So that's a very proper way of tackling the subject. In other places, synagogues will be preserved as a ruins, but without creating from them memorials. They are not included in the narration, in the fabric of this living town. So this is another example. But in other places, like this, like in this town of Dębica, you can clearly see that the synagogue has been renovated. You can see this circular window, which is unique for the synagogues in Galicia. This is actually a synagogue, the window not for the people to look outside, but for the God to look from outside at his people praying in this synagogue. Well, there are no people praying in the synagogue today because it was turned into a shop. Just like this one in the city of Kalwaria Zebrzydowska. So actually, if you come to Poland, you'll see, and that's certainly one of the major issues, that there's no one idea of what to do with those sites. There are going to be 800 different scenarios, with some of those synagogues being preserved as a ruin, some of them being protected, some of them being turned into museums, or some of them being turned into shops. A good example of this renovation, that it's the ongoing process, is here. This is a town of Dąbrowa Tarnowska, and this is actually one of the largest synagogues in all of Galicia. It was renovated in 2012. This is when this photo was taken. You can see it. I mean, it looks probably better than on day one, 100 or 150 years ago. And it serves as a museum toward the Jewish community of that town, but also as a museum of other things. And again, because we are kind of running out of time, slowly, I want to show you the final part of the exhibition, which is called the revival of Jewish life. Because what we witnessed in Poland after 1990s were very two unusual, unexpected processes. The first one was revival of Jewish life. Suddenly, out of the shadows, out of the closed closets, Jews came out in 1990s when Poland became a democratic country and recognized or announced that they want to be here in Poland as a Polish Jews. So as a result, we started to see a growing Jewish community, which today is slightly bigger than it was yesterday, in the sense that the communities are growing. The infrastructure of life is being put together with Jewish kindergartens, with Jewish schools, with synagogues and mikvah and so on and so on. But it's also, I mean, the Jewish communities exist today in 8 or 9 Polish cities. These are only major cities and towns of Poland. And what is fascinating is that today we see that some of those members of the community are kind of the old folks. This is the old generation. So here you see Mr. Tadeusz Jakubowicz, a chairman of the Jewish community. He's a Holocaust survivor. Before him, his family member, his father was a chairman of the Jewish community. They are for them, future is not that much exciting. For them, this is the past where the roots are. So when they meet, when they dream about Vilna and about Lemberg and about Jerusalem, and they listen to klezmer music and they eat gefilte fish. At the same time, we're seeing a different Jewish community, far more energized, far more future-oriented, far younger, and the center of the Jewish community in Kraków is Jewish Community Center. Those Jews, those people that are there, dream about Berlin and Haifa and New York and Tel Aviv. They dream about, they eat hummus and falafel and then listen to Matizyahu and Beastie Boys rather than klezmer music. So there are different ideas for what does it mean to be Jewish. What does the Jewishness means? And it's fascinating for us to witness those developments. But the second unusual, unexpected process was also involvement of the non-Jews in preserving of the Jewish culture, in promoting Jewish culture, in teaching about the Jewish culture. And Kraków today is a site where one of, if not the biggest Jewish culture festival in all of the world is happening every summer, every year, for 7 or 8 or 9 days. Jewish artists from all over the world, artists from cantors from Jerusalem, singers from Africa, or Beastie Boys from New York, women rabbi, men rabbi. They come to teach, to talk, to present Jewish life in all its shadows, in all its smells, in all its colors, the entire polyphony of a Jewish world. And I find it very symbolic that this festival is happening precisely in Kraków, so close to Auschwitz, so close to the site of this ultimate destruction. And while the festival has become very famous and recognized, Galician Jewish Museum, we're working with hundreds and hundreds of local activists like this woman, like this lady, who is a teacher and who created in her small town of Wadowice a guidebook and a book devoted to the history of the local Jews. So we're seeing more and more of Poles that are commemorating the past, that are interested in the Jewish history, that are teaching and fighting anti-Semitism, and that's certainly something that is worth mentioning. And I could really go on for another 3 hours and 15 minutes, but I think maybe now would be a good time to finish up my part and see if there are questions from the audience.
Yes, thank you, Jacob, for such a fascinating and engaging lecture. It was truly a unique opportunity for all of us to see images from the museum and places that few of us will be able to actually visit in person. So thank you. For those of you who are new to the Institute, I'm Matthew Silverman, the director of the Haberman Institute for Jewish Studies. So welcome to all of you out there. Please feel free to continue to type in questions if you have any. I want to go ahead and begin with a question. Just to, Jacob, you would give a little more background about your upbringing and your journey to becoming the director of the museum. If you want to give a little bit of your little bio briefly.
Sure. Thank you, Matthew. Well, yes, I'm part of this process, or example of this process of the non-Jews being involved in preserving Jewish culture. I myself I'm not Jewish. My family has been living in this Jewish district of Kazimierz for generations, for more than 200 years, as a Catholic minority in the Jewish town. When I was being brought up, I had no idea. I had no idea about the Jewish past. Not because my family been anti-Semitic or any other reason, but because my family didn't consider this to be of any importance. They didn't consider the story of the Jews to be important for us non-Jews. So for me, it was an absolute surprise when suddenly and gradually I've been discovering that so much of my hill, of my neighborhood, of my town has been created and created by the people I had never heard about, by the Jews. And then I discovered actually how much of my own identity has connected to this Jewish world that existed before the war. So just to give you one idea, I mean, my family home in Kazimierz, my mom would always describe a stove in a kitchen, an oven, as a shabashnik, as a Shabbos oven. And for me, for a big part of my young life, I was convinced that shabashnik, a Shabbos oven, is a proper Polish word for a stove. So there were those things that my family, because they were living so close with their Jewish neighbors, not close in terms of intimate relations, but so close as a neighbors. There were so many other things that they taken and preserved without acknowledgement of where those things are coming from. So all of that made me interested and fascinated in the Jewish story of my neighborhood of Kazimierz, and then in general the Polish-Jewish relations.
Thank you. Yes, it's wonderful to hear your story and bringing these connections to life. There's a number of questions here. I want to just jump straight to them, and then we can circle back to other pieces. But there's a number of questions about. I'll just read this one, and other ones relate to this. Within the museum, are you allowed to say that many Poles participated in the murder of their Polish neighbors? And how do you deal with the recent laws against admitting such? And then there's some other questions that also relate to the current state of anti-Semitism in Poland. If there's something more you want to say about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, Galician Jewish Museum is an NGO, so we're a non-governmental organization. So that puts us in a slightly different position than some of our partner museums that are government sponsored or sponsored by authorities, local authorities, and so on. But nevertheless, yes, I mean, we've never had any kind of pressure from the government on the fact that we're describing what's been happening. We're describing that, yes, there have been, within this context of the Holocaust in Eastern Europe, there were different scenarios. And that's what we say is that we're learning increasingly more about the involvement of the Poles, Catholic Poles, in the persecution and in the mass killing of their Jewish neighbors. That's kind of, we often, I'm doing that, we often say Poles and the Jews, as if those Jews would not be Poles. They were, of course, Poles, and the proper way of addressing them would be Jewish Poles and Catholic Poles, or Catholics and the Jews. So that's kind of a side note. But yes, we've never had any kind of pressure, and it's not to say that the Holocaust bill that we all know about is not real, but actually, the Polish, and it's also to say, I mean, the Polish government is not a monolith. It's a right-wing government that consists different groups. Some of them are more right, some of them are more center, and within those parties, there are those that are very closely to being anti-Semitic. Even if they are not anti-Semitic, they are from time to time using this anti-Semitic rhetoric, describing the Jews as a threat, as an enemy, describing the Jews through problematic issues like a property and so on, rather than showing that the Jews are part of the landscape, that they've been part of they are part of our DNA, cultural DNA and the heritage. But the Holocaust bill, in my opinion, has been created to kind of cater to the very small group of people, of voters, who are crucial for the government to stay in power. And as a result, we've not heard we've never had any kind of pressure from the government. And we all know, again, about the cases of Professor Grabowski, who has been put on trial for the things that he wrote in the book about precisely the Polish involvement in the Holocaust. So, to make a long story short, no, we haven't had any pressure. What is not being reported is also the positive involvement of the government. So that's kind of the paradox. On the one hand, we have the government that is producing this Holocaust bill, and on the other hand, we have a government that is donating huge amount of money to preserve Jewish cemeteries, to sponsoring Polish-Israeli youth exchanges. We've been doing this until COVID happened. Every year, we've been inviting Israeli kids to stay with Polish kids and then sending Polish kids to Israel, thanks to the support of the Polish government. At the same time, we have this government that is putting on trial historians who are, in their opinion, attacking or shattering the good name of Poland. So Poland, again, is a complicated place, but it also makes it so interesting.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer, and it's good to hear that you're not getting pressure yourself, or the museum at least, to make any changes. Another question here is sort of about the exhibit itself. The person noted that many of they noticed the placards were in Polish and in English, and whether or not the exhibits are organized for the observation of American Jews who are potentially, returning or visiting. Or is it for Polish individuals today, and if that's part of the narrative that's being told?
Well, the Galician Jewish Museum is for many years has been run by foreigners. As I mentioned, I described that the founders of the museum and creators of the exhibition, the first directors, they were all coming from UK, from England. And if you come to Galician Jewish Museum somewhere in 2007 or 2008, you'd learn that the Galician Jewish Museum is an organization that is run by foreigners and is catering mostly to foreigners. In 2007 or 8, we had around 20,000 visitors. Almost 90% of them were foreigners. But then things changed over the time. I mean, I was appointed as a director in 2010. But if we would come to the museum again, let's say in 2019, so just before COVID has changed our lives, you'd see that in 2019 we had 72,000 visitors. 40% of them were Poles, and on top of those 72,000 people that came through the doors, we've run one of the largest educational program in Poland, with more than 30,000 Poles participating in the programs that we've organized in their hometowns and villages in all of Poland. So the museum is catering to a diverse audience. The captions are in Polish and in English. English being a lingua franca of a modern world. But yes, we have a wide range of visitors. Again, pre-COVID, of course. Now things are different. But in 2019, among the biggest groups of the visitors would be Poles, would be Brits, Americans, French, Germans, and Israelis too. We don't have captions in Hebrew. We know that, but that's just purely technical issue. I mean, the exhibition is already very heavy with text, so we had to limit ourselves to those two main languages.
Thank you. As sort of a final sort of follow-up question, there's just more questions about the museum specifically. One person asked if there's audio guides or recordings of other languages, if there's people who want to come who don't speak English or Spanish or English or Polish. And another person just wanted to know generally, like, if you're able to visit the museum, like what are the hours, and if there's anything more you want to say about what it would mean to visit your museum.
Sure. We have. I mean, if you come to the museum, we have volunteers who are able to guide in different languages. These are mostly German, French, sometimes not always Hebrew. So we're able to help through that. We also had a audio guide, but unfortunately we need to update it. And now with the COVID, with a war in Ukraine, went down on the list of the crucial expenses to do. Again, as an NGO, we need to be very careful about the budget, and that's my role, a big part of the day, just to make sure that the ends will meet at the end of the day. So I would very, very much like to encourage you to come and visit the museum. And actually, the tour that we've made is you can also actually do it yourself. If you go to the Galicia Jewish Museum website, which is www.galiciajewishmuseum.org, you can buy a ticket and make this tour by yourself by clicking and seeing all the captions and all the photographs, just like I showed you. I would encourage you to do that, and also look at our website, the bookshop, and some of our exhibitions that are in digital, in online format. But otherwise, you can visit the museum daily, 7 days a week, from 11 until 6 o'clock in the afternoon. We are open 362 days a year, with exception of Yom Kippur and the Christmas. And yes, I very hope that we shall see each other at some point in Kraków. Let me just say one more thing. We also do have a traveling exhibitions, and one of them is now being presented at the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. It's devoted to a story of a diary from the Łódź ghetto that was discovered in Auschwitz. This is a truly fascinating story. So if you are in Texas, or if you are planning to catch some sun in Texas, make sure to visit Dallas Holocaust Memorial. And this exhibition will then go in May next year to Skokie, the Holocaust Museum in Illinois. So stay tuned, and also you can sign up to our newsletters to get more info on what we do at the museum.
Great. Thank you again. And yes, hopefully some of us will have the opportunity, myself included, to visit the museum sometime in the near future. So thank you again for this really insightful discussion. We've received a number of people already writing in saying thank you. So we appreciate it.
No, it's Matthew, it's a great pleasure for me. I really enjoyed that because of the COVID, because of the the war, we haven't seen that many groups, that many friends coming into Poland. So this gives me a kind of a sense of the good old days when we could see and speak with a lot of people. But yes, I mean, Poland is complicated. Poland is whatever you want it to be, and that's what makes it so special. If you look at, if you want to find our Poland, or if you want to follow story of death and destruction and anti-Semitism, it's there, no doubt. But Poland can also offer you a story of existence despite all of those things, of the revival, of the strength of the Jewish people, of this very positive and unique interaction between the Jews and the non-Jews in this very peculiar space. So Poland is really unique and interesting and can offer far more than what often people expect. So again, be interested in Poland.
Yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful note to leave on. It's definitely a country of diversity and so much. So thank you again, and Shana Tova to you and to everyone out there. We look forward to seeing you all again in one of our programs after the holidays, or one of our classes. So thank you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you all. Have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you.